You know, we could use some production quality up in here. Achoo! Oh, that's better. Hey, it's Brooks with Character Design Forge. A lot of the times in the videos that I'm making on this channel, I'll show you some time-lapse artwork, whether it's a character design or it's an illustration that I'm doing, a 3D model, and I'll take the footage from my time making that and shrink it down, speed it up so it fits into like a 6 or 8 minute long video, and I'll talk over it and tell you about sort of my thinking process along the way. The character creation process or the illustration process isn't necessarily quick or easy, and so usually it makes sense to shrink it down like that. But in this series of videos, I thought it would be cool to just let the camera roll in real time, let me kind of talk you through what I'm thinking as I'm doing it, and hopefully it gives you some insight into the character creation process. And maybe if there's something that goes by too quickly in the time lapse, this will allow you to see it sort of at real speed. Okay, so the only step that I've done ahead of actually recording and drawing and showing you guys is gathering some the reference images you see on the left there, and then listing out a few of the sort of traits and kind of indicators that are going to go into this character, things to work off of. And what I did was I asked a few people for some prompts, some things that could kind of control the character so that I'm not just coming up with something completely on my own, things that I just like to see, but rather kind of treating it a little bit more like a client is coming to me with a specific need, right? A specific character and a purpose for that character. So here's the things that I have so far. What I'm looking to create is a street urchin-like character who is self-important and vain and is also playing an instrument. And the idea for that is that they're not just a bard character, but something along the, like a warrior or an archer or, a healer or someone who's doing something with the instrument, if that makes sense. So sort of a hybrid along those lines. And some of the reference that I put together, that there wasn't much as far as beggar characters or street urchins that I could find, but I found one in sort of tatters like this. And what I'd like to do is have very tattered clothing on our character, but I also want her, because she's self-important and vain and things, is I'd like for her to have a sort of Victorian style or Elizabethan garment that's, she is tattered itself, but, is very gaudy and the sort of thing a wealthy person would wear. So I'm careful about something like this because this looks a little bit just like it could easily go into just, she looks like a court jester kind of thing. But I do like the ruffle sort of coming off of the collar here. And I like the overall shape that comes with something like this that kind of wraps around the back before it meets the waist. So I'm going to try and be a little bit like top heavy as far as some of the elements within that garment. So things like big shoulder pads and things. What I'd like to do is even keep this sort of, make a ruffle here and keep this shape around the back, but also adding like sort of layered tattered rags or scarves around that. I thought that would kind of go together well. And then I assembled a few just kind of crazy looking instruments. This is a kithara, I think. An old-timey instrument that kind of predates a guitar, but just some cool, designs and extra things going on with it. This is I gotta double check the name on it. It's a crazy named instrument with just so much extra stuff going on, reminiscent of a violin. And then I think what might end up happening is she'll be carrying a long staff or walking stick with a flute on the end of it. That was another idea I had. So we'll see where we go with it from here. And I'll just kind of keep you guys updated on what sort of my thought process is as I'm sketching these out. And we aren't going to worry so much about this stuff at first. What I'm going to start with is just some really broad shapes, really tiny. And just to get a general idea for the character and sort of the broad shapes. This is what I do with a lot of characters. And the reason for it is because something is better than nothing. And starting from a certain area or starting from drawing and talking is going to be nice and fun in this video. But starting with just even the most basic shape that you can and building on it is a lot easier, I think, than staring at a blank space. So kind of thinking, sure, her hair is going to be obviously sort of maybe not matted, but very kind of untaken care of. And maybe we'll do something like a headscarf there. And obviously I assembled all that stuff, all this fashion and stuff, to get a general aesthetic or a look. But character design is much more than just, skinning a character with existing fashion, right? It's not just about the clothes. So that's what I'm doing here, is getting a nice sense of that. And skirts wise, like maybe we'll do something kind of asymmetrical that drapes down too, that's also kind of tattered. I was kind of thinking along the lines of, what kind of musician is both penniless and arrogant like this? And I thought, well, maybe because she's maybe predisposed to be very arrogant and self-important, then she doesn't take the time to practice because she figures, she's good how she is. But maybe she's not the best musician, and so that means it's kind of left her penniless, and kind of has yet to realize that, make sort of the connection between the fact that she's not very good and that being the reason she's not getting work as a musician, and sort of maybe she's in denial and has excuses, right? So I don't want to go too I don't know, I'd like to avoid sort of some things that I see a lot, like some almost cliches with you see what I'm doing is it just I'm creating negative space within the large silhouette. And I don't want her to look like a pirate, so I'll see about that. Maybe the headband's not great for now. Maybe it's something we'll add in the future. And sort of the length now of the skirt is a little bit too, I feel like it wouldn't fit in the era, that sort of Victorian era. So maybe it comes down a bit. There's what's the name of that? This was another thing in my research. The bustle is something that was a big part of the fashion, which was just basically like an extra layer over top of, it was almost wire framing over top of the skirt. So we can try and we'll pretend that she's got like sort of a makeshift bustle. Let's move on to another concept now. I want to try another set of shapes and really kind of push the idea of her being sort of arrogant and snooty, nose turned up. There's a nose. It's going up. And we'll see what we can do about all of the wrapping and things going on the shoulders. We don't want to restrict the movement too much of the character. The way that if this was a staff and the way that she's holding it, it almost, I'm thinking from a storytelling perspective and stuff, it almost looks a little bit like it'd be nicer if we went more like a cane, right? And sort of because that's a look from sort of the wealthy. I think because there was so much filth in the street, they would kind of, in that era, the Victorian era, they would keep a cane with them to kind of push garbage aside and dog stuff aside in the street. And I still want the character to be capable and So the idea too with the prompt was that maybe this is like an NPC or someone that's your guide in a game that's musically focused, right? So maybe she's not the only bard. Like being a bard is not a unique trait to this character. This is pretty cool. I mean, I'm gonna reuse some of these shapes here. The head, we're not worried too much about the face and stuff right now. We'll get to that. Let me sort of blow up. And another thing here is like the drawing is all about sort of what shapes and stuff we can get, but there's an element of almost drawing purposefully bad at this point because it's just about getting something down. At this point I'm liking our original better, but I like to go through this a few times just in case. I kind of like the upward energy, right? There is a top heaviness to the one on the left more so than this one. And maybe we can kind of push it so that it's that way, arch the back a little bit more. So because I want to kind of give you everything in real time and everything, I'm going to do my best to sort of abbreviate the process, if that makes sense, so that you're not just watching. Honestly, a lot of times the entire process for creating a character can charitably take, 3 or 4 hours, if not, an entire day, or depending on kind of the complexity of what you're looking to make. You're looking at weeks and just lots of iteration. So we're doing what we can to make an iteration, not so much a final design. So I have an idea here. Let's take what we have, and we'll kind of have her. We'll use this as a guide. Bring down the opacity here. Another thing I'm always doing is drawing kind of my face is over here, and the camera's looking straight down. It's not what I'm used to necessarily. So it's fine though. I'm getting used to it with all the recording I've been doing like this. No big deal. We're gonna kind of push the pose a little bit, get her looking over this direction. Sort of away from, maybe there's someone over here that we're looking away from. And let's how do we really add this sort of the same way that this arm anatomy isn't perfect there, but we'll try and shift the weight as much as we can. I think this is what we need to do too, is have this torso kind of like reach a certain point, and then we add a sort of a segment here that's actually wider because of, whatever extra bustle is going on. Maybe because these layers are wrapping, we have like tattered cloth with each band. I kind of like that, especially as it gets down here. Add some holes and things. I like the position of these feet. It's not bad. Yeah. Is the cane good? I mean, it's sort of, it's hard for me to see at this point. We want it to be dynamic. So maybe we'll bring it up here. We'll turn this arm around. I love, there's maybe some purist type people who aren't a fan of using digital art tools to sort of squash and move around and rotate and stuff, but it's just, it's not so much that I can't redraw or do what I'm doing with those tools. It's just all about speed. And in a work setting, you know, all of those tools do a lot to speed things up. It's the difference between spending hours and hours and less hours. Okay. So this is something I like, and we'll keep kind of transposing these initial ideas. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, I like this head better from the original over here. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do is we'll literally copy and paste the head. Bring it over here. We'll flip it over. Just kind of a rough job here. Bring it in there. Yeah, not bad. We'll keep everything, and I think as we can get rid of our text here, and we can bump this set of sketches because we did it so small. We're gonna, you know, bring them up in size, and they're gonna look even worse and everything. But that's sort of what the next step is about. Yeah, man, I really like this original kind of skirt shape too. Kind of because you get more up here. I'm kind of going back and forth on this. Maybe if it comes behind the legs a little bit, it's not too bad. Yeah, so much of me is like our original. Maybe if we can swap the head in here. And again, like I don't want to hit pirate territory. It might be unavoidable in certain ways. If our hand is pointed up a little bit, it's like a little bit of an arc here. And I mean, if we can add some more musical stuff to her, maybe like a drum that's hanging sort of on the back here. It's something. We'll see. So this is the image that we're going to blow up. Oops. And from here we can just kind of cut and paste it. And we'll start to do stuff that like kind of matters artistically, like draftsmanship wise. We'll add sort of a skeleton, and we'll do a lot more you know, just at a higher resolution here. So kind of establishing right away, we'll check what we already have. We've got a pelvis line that's going here, a shoulder line that's going kind of here, and we can exaggerate that a bit more. Got a really strong curve of the spine that we could kind of even push further like this. And maybe it's kind of coming down like this. Little difference there is where the leg and the spine hit there. Okay, so we've got a head that's pointing over here, right? I like the idea of her being a little bit more oval shaped, or rather kind of just round head as much as possible. I kind of have an idea in mind for the face, just because of the sort of expression and everything. So that's not bad. We can follow our original leg lines here. I'll do some flipping to sort of just audit myself to make sure this is looking good. Let's flip the whole image. Not bad. We'll just bring this arm out here and tilt our wrist up like that for now. And we do need to sort of establish where the hand of this is going to go on the hip. Maybe about there. Yeah, it's not bad. If you haven't seen my video on Fight the Flat, which is just sort of about construction and perspective and stuff, this is basically what I'm doing. I'm not creating actual tubes and everything, but I'm just making sure that things all kind of work together. When you're making a character that's kind of on a fairly flat plane like this is kind of like a 3/4 view. It's a lot of shorthands you can kind of figure out ahead of time. Bring this neck down. And kind of once we have this basic structure here, there's things that we can do shape language wise. I'm not going to go into it too much with her, like from a over exaggerating the shapes of the body standpoint, or mainly going to focus on the face, the expression, and sort of what the garment is saying about the character. If we want to play with kind of exaggerated shape language for stylized characters, that sort of would, I think, take more iterations to get sort of do justice, I think. And again, we're kind of abbreviating here in the interest of kind of getting you through the steps as quick as possible without actually speeding up, It's not bad. And then we just we have a torso shape here that we can mimic from this curve, and kind of a spot by about here that we're going to start adding segments when we can, try and do something interesting there. Erase some of this just for clarity. Yeah, so I'm happy with that. We're going to add so much over top of this skeleton, though. And let's give some indication that this is sort of a flute situation. And the thing that I'm thinking about with it being like a walking stick is, the air needs to kind of escape through the bottom. So maybe we'll keep as much of it up top here as possible, but then I like the way that clarinets and woodwinds will have this sort of these keys that jut out with little piping and stuff. So we'll try and do little ornate things like that. And let's add a little bit down here, just even though it'll kind of transition into some kind of gnarly wood, I think. We want to give the impression that this is still part of the flute. Because if it was just this kind of thing where there's a flute and then a walking stick directly underneath it, there's no way for the air to get out at the bottom, unless it was somehow hollow or something. So we'll see what we can get out of that. Okay. So this is a point where I've done a certain amount. It's incidentally dinner time for me, and I think I'm gonna stop at this point and come back and sort of come at it from a fresh perspective, which is an important part of doing this. Okay, so took a quick meal break here. A few things that kind of stood out to me as most egregious, kind of coming back and looking at this again. This leg shape is just all wrong. But one thing that I thought of that kind of solves that pirate problem I was having was it has to do with the feet. Before, I think in these sketches, she's basically got boots and kind of, high boots like this definitely sells like a pirate idea, right? But what I thought instead was if we end up going barefoot with her, so we've got like the toes and some wrapping happening, we can go a little bit thicker on the legs, I think, and have the sort of the bandages come up. So we have a lot of wrapping happening on the character. She's getting a little bit mummified. But I think that's a good solution. We'll kind of leave that like that. So at this point, what I'm going to do is basically drop this layer down, just leaving it kind of as a skeleton. And we can come in and start doing some work on actually laying out the face and the garment details and stuff like we said we were going to. So basically I have this area for the face here. I'll drop my brush size down a bit. And what I'd like to do is, she's already looking over this way. We'll have her eyes kind of coming back and sort of glaring down that way, right? So let's see what we can do with that. Kind of define some sockets. I want the shape of the face to kind of come in a bit like a sort of like that's sort of an exaggeration, but kind of the almond eyes that are pointing downwards a bit on the interior. She doesn't have to look evil, that's, we're kind of avoiding that, but just stuck up, right? And I might be angling the eyes a little bit too much for what I'm going for. It's kind of a simple expression right now. Maybe if there's kind of a smirk to the mouth, we're avoiding the evil look, right? I'm not sure I'm happy with these eyes, honestly. Might be something I readdress. Yeah, the smirk is too... It's too... it kind of kills the vibe we're going for, right? I'll add some construction to the face a bit. Again, we're going for kind of like a round face. So it's going to point. The chin is going to kind of come in there. Oh, nice. We got a siren outside, if you can hear that. That's always good. And as far as the hair, we're going to avoid the hair band and stuff, but as long as it's really tattered and sort of unkempt, we'll be okay. I'm doing a lot recently with the tilt functionality in Procreate, so you get a line that's going straight. The tip of the pen is like that. So if you're directly on the point, you get a thin line. But then if you've got it sideways, you're getting a much thicker line. So I'm still, that was kind of broken for me for a while, and somewhere along the way that was fixed in software, so I'm only now kind of getting the hang of it, and so you might see me struggling with some thickness of lines in certain points. This is a little bit too much detail for the hair, for what we're looking for. Yeah, we'll leave that. We'll let that be. And I want to look back at my reference now for sort of how the neck looks on some of these old garments, because it has a lot of looping, and the collar's a bit high. So yeah, I want to mimic that as well here. A high collar. Because you could kind of speculate on how it was she obtained this garment, but no matter what, it's of value to her. It's the real deal, It's not like she made this. It's a real old garment. It's just very tattered. Hopefully that's big enough as an element. One thing that I like to do with design in general is, if you're going to add something like this, like, really, you can emphasize and exaggerate it by making it really large and prominent. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with that. I was sizing it up for an even more exaggerated effect, but I think I like that how it is. As long as we can get enough definition in the sort of torso here coming down. Yeah. That's not bad. So we wanted to mess with the shoulders a bit too, and I think right before I add like sort of this tattered patterning around here, I just want to quick make this line. I'm going to do a flip real quick. It's not bad. Let's let this wrap around. How is this? It seems like it's just a little bit of an extra layer of cloth that's coming up to here, so it's actually going to go behind our kerchief here, or I don't know what you really call that, or if I've been calling it something else. This is one of those I'm talking and drawing, and you can tell I'm thinking more than I'm speaking correctly, where my thought processes are going. Yeah, if that just kind of ends up falling behind our scarf there, we should be good. As long as it's not a tangent. A tangent's when you've got like kind of, two lines butting up like that when you really don't need them to, and what it ends up doing is confusing sort of the volumes and the shapes. And the same thing's kind of happening here. So maybe we can keep the fluffiness of our scarf, but allow it to recede back just enough that we've got clarity of our other shapes of the body. And how does this wrap around the other side? We kind of get this, right, where you just get a hint of it, which makes sense. This would wrap up to meet the collar, and then we have some material up here. That makes sense. And we'll make it match over here. Simple stuff. So now we can kind of start draping, and I like the idea of the big poofy sleeves, or the big poofy shoulders rather, but I think that'll be just a little bit too much. So we'll do some layering of tattered rags. And we'll try as much as we can to sort of layer those. And here's a problem right here, is what is this coming into? What's it hanging on? And I think if it was a line more like this, or even less than that. Let's redraw, because I don't want to lose this. I want this to make sense, that this is draping and hanging, right? And then we've got maybe an additional layer that's hanging here. And then from that kind of clean line, we can start chipping away. That's not bad. Do the same over here. That one's kind of good because we don't see it as much. We could even do a band here. That kind of puffs back out. Make sure it's following the construction of our arm the right way. We have it wrapping this way so that it, you know, if it was pointed down like that, it would mean the arm is, that we're looking at the cylinder of the arm as though it were pointed backwards like that. Because it's pointing forwards, it means that we're looking at it like this. We'll meet the elbow here, and maybe at a certain point we lose our sleeve completely. Although I do like the way that these kind of come down and complete, so we'll leave it full. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do another pass on that face. Just a little bit too plain right now. Too placeholdery. And this can be kind of ornate. We'll add that in a bit. This nice little tricky hand placement. Which I entirely doubt I'll get right on the first try. Something I kind of wanted to talk about in all this too is something that I recognize as a strength in myself. I don't know if it's unique to me as far as artists go, but I find that it's not a strength of mine that I get things right the first time. It's more so that I've gotten to a point where I'm able to audit well later. And so that idea of starting with something versus nothing is helpful because it leads to a chain reaction of fixes, right? And so, you know, if you have something down and you can visually correct it, it's maybe sometimes better than just coming up with something whole cloth. And that's why I think I'm able to do well with Patreon critiques, is I notice the mistakes, and maybe at a heightened level, or maybe that's just something that happens with everyone artistically, is as they grow, maybe their skill doesn't so much get better as, or maybe it does, but in tandem with that, their ability to correct things that don't look quite right grows as well. I thought a little bit too while I was away about we could change the pose a bit where the cane is angled away, but that would change a little bit too much. For another time, I guess. Okay, that flute can basically stay the way that it was. I think I'm going to have some hanging back here of this scarf that's up front. That kind of adds to that sort of top-heavy idea that I had. And at this point now, we want to kind of, is there anything special happening? Not so much. We can do that kind of curve across this part of the torso to represent the end of her initial garment. And I'm guessing this is sort of multiple layers, but just the idea of that old gaudy wealthy garment, something that she found or acquired somehow. But it's likely a lot of layers in there. Okay, so that's a little plain looking, but it's something. I want to avoid the girdle look or the corset look, because that's sort of like this very generic, like how to make an old timey looking costume, like shortcut that people go to a lot, where it's not even necessarily accurate that people would be dressed with those like shoelace corsets of like visible. You know, depending on the time and era and stuff. So let's do our first layer of tattered cloth. Maybe that's too much tattering. Maybe less is more. So we'll do that where it's just frayed on a few places. And maybe an additional layer that's kind of wrapping back up here. I don't know how that looks. It's something. Okay, and we kind of want to take it a little bit easy on the tattering just because we're going to get our foot wrap here in a second. Let's do that. That's changing the direction of that one, but okay. Let's get a knee and bring this down. First big toe. Are we just giving her 3 toes? That's a little weird. His cartoon hands are always 3-fingered, but it can be, but it's a little bit different with toes, huh? Let's do that. We'll give her 4 toes. Same as a cartoon hand. Thumb and 3 fingers. Big toe and 3 little toes. Okay. Let's see if we can mimic that over here. I'm widening the base of the, you know, not tapering that calf and lower part of the leg in as much. Now that we've got like some material. Nice, got a telemarketer interrupting the recording there. And I've lost my train of thought. Whatever I was saying, I'm sure it was very, very important. I'm going to take it easy on that curve of the big toe. Try and match the other side to a certain extent. The toes kind of ramp down that way, so if you kind of give each toe that opportunity to bend down on its own, this part of the foot is more like this. Obviously, the hands and the feet I'm drawing in sort of a very flat style, but that comes from exploring sort of what each of the hands and feet's individual forms are made up of in 3D shapes, and sort of figuring out what the flow is, how you can distill those down into more simplified shapes, and that only comes from drawing them earnestly, as if they were drawing them realistically or exploring them realistically. Okay, we can add some wraps here. Want to make sure that we're following the forms right. Yeah, something like this. Don't want to do the X with the cloth too often here. Let me get to the knee here and just add a little bit of a bump in the road as it wraps around. Okay. Banded up feet for warmth. Banded up legs. So we'll make sure that this looks like cloth. Obviously, I'm going to go back in and sort of change the contour of the outside once I get this down. Get into the knee again. It's something, yeah. I'm happy with that. Still a few things that we're going to revisit, especially considering the face. But at this point, I think we are good as far as like a part one. And we can revisit and sort of continue to refine our character over the course of a part two. That's it for part one of this video, but I make 2 new videos a week here on Character Design Forge. Subscribing on YouTube lets you know when new videos are made available. My username is BagelDenizen across Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch. And if you'd like to support me in this channel, you can go to patreon.com/BagelDenizen and get a lot of things in return, including a personalized video critique of your work, which is really helpful and has been able to help people kind of level up their art careers. That's something you get at the Novice Bard tier if you back me there. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating.